Hey, hope you're doing well. That opening sequence you just watched was the most recent little video project I did. I got a lot of new video gear in because, like I mentioned in a previous video, I really want to start making my way into video and becoming proficient at it. So I got a bunch of new video gear in, and I went out with my wife Emily to just practice using it. I had a loose idea in my head of what I wanted to do. I'm pretty happy with it, but because I'm still very new to video and figuring out how I want to tell stories and how I even shoot video, what my process looks like, all these different things, I want to sit down and critique that video. I've finished editing it, I exported it, it's on my Instagram now. Everybody that is going to see it pretty much has seen it. So I want to sit down now after I've called it done and go back over it and figure out what I would have changed or what I want to do different next time. I hope this is helpful for you. I know it's gonna be good for me because I watched through it again and I noticed like 2 or 3 things that I was like, man, I should have done that differently. And so I thought it'd be good to sit down with y'all. You can watch through it with me and just talk about what I could do differently, what I, in my opinion, think could have been done better about this little short B-roll cinematic sequence. I don't really know what to call it. It's not a short film. It's just practice. So I hope y'all enjoy, I hope you find it helpful, and without further ado, let's get into watching it. So right off the bat, the first thing I noticed when I watched it back after I'd finished editing it, it'd been exported, is that the lighting for the lighting in the shot of Emily, that like portrait shot, the lighting was so good. I mean, the sunset behind her looked great. The lighting on her face was very soft. It looked fantastic. And I didn't realize, I mean, I noticed it while I was out there, but I didn't comprehend it, I guess, that the lighting was that good. And so going back, I definitely would have shot more footage lit this way, facing this direction, getting that really nice soft light wrapping around her, because if you notice, the shot immediately after that, she's, I mean, kind of lit similar. It's almost backlit. It's very interesting. And looking back on it now, it's not my favorite. She's in shadow, and that's partially because the sun had gone down and partially because I had her facing sort of at a right perpendicular to the sun. And it wasn't bright enough to provide very much light. So going back, I would have shot these 2 shots of her walking or spinning on the path. I would have done those with her facing the sun because the light was so good. The second shot of her walking down the path and turning around is definitely more well lit than the first shot. If you're looking at her face as she turns around, she's got that really nice warm soft light wrapping around her face, so it's still, that's good. I just would have maybe gone in and zoomed in a little bit closer, just really shown off that nice light, because it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful evening, and I think some of these shots would have looked a whole lot better if I utilized the light a little bit better. So the very opening shot of this little sequence is just some plants around the field we were in with the sunset in the background. It's sort of a generic shot, just kind of is what it is. I think it's pretty. It helps set kind of where we are, I suppose. But what I would have done going back is I would have shot more detail-oriented shots in the field, because if you look at it, I've got a portrait shot. Sort of the very first time Emily is shown in the sequence is that portrait shot where the lighting's really great. I love that. I'm glad I have that. I think that's one of the best shots of the whole sequence. And then I have 2 shots of her walking, so 2 really wide shots. I don't have anything except that opening shot that really shows details of where we are. I think it's pretty self-explanatory where we are, like we're on a path in a field. Because of those 2 wider shots walking. But as you go farther into the sequence, when we get more into the woods and out on the pier, I focused more on details. You've got the shot of the spider, you've got the shot of that tree branch, the water moving on the lily pad, the lily at the end. There was just a lot more environment shown off, as well as having some shots of Emily moving around and that kind of thing. So I think one of the biggest critiques I have with this is that I didn't keep it consistent throughout the whole thing. at the very beginning, it's very subject person heavy. You know, it's mostly shots of Emily. And then towards the end, it's mostly shots of the environment. And I think that going back and trying to do this over again, I would try and balance it out a little bit more, where I have a really good dispersion of Emily and our environment. Speaking of those detail shots, one of the things I'm the least happy with about this, actually I would say that overall it is the thing I'm the least happy with. There were so many really beautiful details that I think are diminished because I didn't bring my tripod with me. I don't love tripods. I like shooting handheld. I like being able to move around, but for some of these detail shots, specifically the spider crawling on its web and the water on the lily pad and the lily at the end, I think those shots would have benefited greatly from being maybe a little bit wider and shot on a tripod, so that the shot is static, but there's movement in the frame. Having the movement come from the thing in the frame, I think just would have looked a whole lot better. The spider crawling on the web is probably the biggest example of this, because I was zoomed in at 200 mil. With my 70-200, doing it handheld, and the spider web was kind of high up, so I was having to hold it up like this. You can't get a stable shot like that. I mean, the shot of the spider is cool because the spider's moving and crawling, but it's very shaky. Warp stabilizer didn't do anything. In fact, it made it worse. So I just sort of had to deal with it. I knew I wanted it in there, and so instead of having it be weirdly warp stabilized or something, I just lived with the shaky handheld shot. So it is what it is. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. If it was the worst thing ever, I wouldn't have put it in there. But I am just a little bit disappointed that I didn't bring my tripod with me so that I could get some of those detail shots in just a more well done, a little bit better way. So anyway, enough about the tripod. Let's talk about the video just a little bit more broadly. Instead of going through like shot by shot, I want to talk about the video generally. And the first thing I want to talk about is the color grade and color correction on this video. I'm happy with it. I think it looks good. It's the feel I was going for. It looks like what I imagined in my head, pretty much. Except for at the beginning shots in the field, I was probably going for a little bit brighter light. So I think we just got there a little bit too late. But anyhow, I think the color correction and the color grade are pretty good. I'm happy with them. However, that's probably an area of video I'm going to be learning about for the rest of my life. That's how it's held with photography. I learn new editing things, or I figure out an editing trick. Even still, I mean, I'm still changing how I edit photos sometimes. So I imagine I'll be learning that forever. So if I were to revisit this video, you know, in 3, 4, 5 years, I imagine my color correction and color grade would look a whole lot different, which is great. I'm happy for that to happen. So not necessarily a critique of the video, just something I want to call attention to, because you always need to be learning something. I'm hoping that if I ever return to this video to recolor correct or color grade it just as a practice exercise, that it'll look a whole lot different. I really hope so. So I just wanted to touch on that, because I'm by no means the best color corrector, color grader ever. Like I say, I'm still getting into video and getting into doing it artfully instead of more documentary style, or more like interview style. That's mostly where my experience with video lies, is doing very almost corporate things, just very utility based video. So trying to do video artfully is still something I'm having to learn. And I think the last thing I want to touch on is going back and looking at this video. I think that it would have benefited from just a touch of film grain. It feels filmic to me, and so I think that going back and looking at it now, I would have added a little bit of film grain, or toyed around with just roughing up the edges a little bit, because I think it would have benefited from that. Not a huge deal, and that's just my personal preference on that. You might think it has too much noise in it, and some of the shots definitely do, but I think it looks good. My final thoughts on the video: I'm pleased with it. It turned out a lot better than I expected it to, for it being my first more art-centered video project. So I'm pleased with it. The feedback on my Instagram on it has been a lot better than I could have hoped for. So I'm very pleased with it, and I know that I can go back and change any of these things. I still have the Premiere project on my computer. I could change it at any time, but I think that it's a helpful exercise to go through and hyper analyze my own work, especially in these early learning stages. So I know I can change it, but I like the idea of once I export something like this, it be the final version of that. For these practice exercises like this, I really want to force myself to complete it, because done is better than perfect 9 times out of 10. And so if I try to be perfect while it is still in my editing sequence, it's never going to be exported. And so I'm forcing myself to export stuff, and then I'll go back, try and learn from it what I can, and try and do better on the next time. If you have recently finished up a new project, I would highly encourage you to give it a couple days and then go back and take a look at it. Bring a notebook, bring a cup of coffee, see what you would do different next time, or what you could have done better. Being your own biggest critic is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing, and you'll only be better for it. I hope this was helpful. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have any critiques of this video of your own that I might have missed, or something that you think would be better, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it, because again, I'm new to this, I'm still learning, so I'm open to any constructive criticism that I can get. I hope you've enjoyed watching, hope I taught you something. If you got any questions, let me know. Please feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later.